Okay, good. So it sounds like the sound is working on our end, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started.
That was Sarah Maxey, our fantastic office manager at Orenstein Solutions, and I'm Susan Orenstein. I'm happy to be here today with the webinar I'm presenting called The Honeymoon's Over, Now What? Marriage doesn't come with instruction manuals, and we're not born knowing how to create and sustain healthy, satisfying relationships. The divorce rate for first marriage is consistently low and can be as high as 80% for remarriages with blended families. In my private practice, I often hear couples saying that the honeymoon's over or they don't feel in love anymore. They've lost that love and feeling. So what can you do to beat the odds? Well, I'm here to tell you that we're not all doomed. Over the past 30 years, and thanks to the marital research of John Gottman, anthropologists, and of neuroscience, we can help couples thrive. I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. Some of you are friends, relatives, colleagues, and clients, and I'm set up to be here with me today. I'm fortunate to have discovered a career dedicated to helping couples and adults create and sustain healthy relationships. I want to share what I've learned today, including common myths and misconceptions couples have, as well as strategies for adding a spark to your relationship. Over the past, so much from every couple that's come into my office, and over the past 25 years, I've learned so much being a part of a couple with my wonderful husband. I'm always learning and I'm always humbled. It's a fascinating topic. So again, I welcome everybody today. Feel free to leave questions in the chat on the right, and at the end of the webinar, I'll respond. We've kept everybody's name private because we know that the topic can be sensitive and we want to protect your anonymity. So we'll start with the common myths and misconceptions about love. If you've read books, watched TV or movies, or talked to just about anybody, you have learned common myths and misconceptions. We all have them. There's so much misinformation out there with common slogans reinforcing these myths, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, don't rock the boat, women use sex to get love, men use love to get sex. I've put a lie to these myths day after day as couples share their longings and heartaches. So I'm going to go over a few of the myths that I hear more frequently. Myth 1, that there is a soulmate out there and we have to find our soulmate. There's one person out of millions that is meant for me. Some folks luck out and find that person and live happily ever after. Sometimes this myth keeps us stuck while dating. We're looking for the perfect match. And other times we're already married, but we think there's someone better out there for us. The truth is that chemistry and connection, a sense of familiarity and attunement are so important. But it's not elusive. You can learn the ingredients for creating and sustaining your relationship without luck or the stars intervening. Myth 2, I fell out of love. I've heard this in variations like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And the idea here is that it just happens, and once you lose that loving feeling, you're helpless to change it, just like spoiled milk. If you leave the milk out too long in the counter the next day, you have to just throw it out. But in my practice, I've heard individuals say this to their partner when they've shut down and they're not open to feelings anymore. Or saying, if your partner's saying this to you, it's not necessarily time to pull the plug. 50% of divorced couples later on say that they have remorse or regret for not trying or for not staying in the relationship. So when you hear someone say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore, you need to figure out, are they saying goodbye, or are they sharing their feelings of fear and despair, but are willing to reinvest? Okay, it could be worse. I see a lot of couples, generally when they're middle-aged, come and say, "Oh, it's not so bad. No one has a good relationship. My parents weren't that happy, and I look around, my neighbors, my friends, nobody's really happy. What do you expect? You know, we have kids, we have a mortgage. Um, this is as good as it gets." And then I hear some men and women say, "Well, I don't know why I'm complaining or why I'm unhappy because he's not an alcoholic or she's not a drug addict or he's never beaten me. So I should be happy. It's fine." But the problem is when you say it could be worse is that your hope at best is that you're willing to settle. And the problem with believing that is that you give yourself permission to stop investing, stop expecting things from your partner and things from yourself, and you're likely to ignore or minimize your partner's complaints and unhappiness. So to summarize, it could be worse is a dangerous myth and idea because it gives you permission to basically give up. Okay. Uh, From the wonderful research of anthropologist Helen Fisher, we know that there are predictable stages in partners' relationships. And she's a really wonderful speaker. You can go on YouTube and watch her, and she's written some lovely books. So I'm a big fan of Helen Fisher. And she notes that romantic love is a universal phenomenon found in all cultures and dates back to our earliest history with poetry, architecture, art, music, all testifying to love between two adults. Let's look at these four universal stages. Okay, the honeymoon, which is the topic of the webinar, or stage one, or what happens after this anyway. The honeymoon period is real, and our brains are literally high as our physiology changes during this state, actually looking quite similar to addiction. So in the little PowerPoint, it says, "Dear heart, it's all in your head." It truly is that our mind really does something different when we're in love. And we have a couple things going on. We have showers of adrenaline. So we have increased blood levels of adrenaline, which cause our racing heart, butterflies in our stomach, sweaty palms. And we also have a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is activated, that's responsible for stimulating desire, motivation, and reward. So we think about our loved one incessantly, spend lots of time trying to woo or charm him or her, and we often have a decreased desire to sleep or eat. And like an addiction, we feel that strong craving and withdrawal when we're not with our loved one. And people will do crazy things when they're in that withdrawal, literally just really crazy. I think people might remember the astronaut who wanted to drive down to see her lover and in Depends or something. And you hear these stories of lovers, because really we're wired when we're in love and we're in this stage one of not being rational and really, again, like having an addiction where we have this intense craving and we're so motivated to do whatever it takes to get that partner. And what's also going on in this honeymoon period or this romantic stage is that we keep thinking of our loved one. We obsess upon them and we magnify their positives. So we notice what we have in common. We notice what we like about them. We notice the attraction. And we feel like we are the luckiest person in the world. We have found that special person. And at the same time, we minimize or overlook every negative. So, they wear this hat or they don't match their clothes and we think that's cute or that's quirky. So these are really common for most people, not every single person, but most couples do experience this. And it can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. Okay. Stage 2 is attachment, and that's where the romantic period morphs into adult attachment, again, after 6 months to 2 years. It can be longer if people have a long distance relationship where they don't see each other very often, then it might take longer. But what happens in this stage is couples are focusing on one love partner. and they decide to commit to a long-term relationship. If a couple develops a secure attachment during this time, they can identify shared dreams, goals, and values. They put each other first, and they create a special bond. Stan Tatkin calls this special bond a couple bubble. And I'm doing some training with him now. It's fantastic. And he says it's really imperative that couples have a couple bubble where they have boundaries to the outside world, but then they really are in it together as a couple, and they have an identity as a couple where they put each other first, and they have a secure bond so that they both experience physical and emotional well-being. Okay, now we're at stage 3. There's a little bump in the road, and that is disillusionment. Actually, when I work with couples, it's very interesting to hear people's stories, and these stages are pretty predictable, just like stages of childhood development. You know, we go through these stages as we develop as a couple, and I'll often ask my couples in my private practice, what was your first disillusionment? Because everybody has them. Once you have that attachment, you are in the real world. Real responsibilities kick in, like mortgage, illnesses, children, in-laws, aging, finances, jobs, neighbors, who's going to cut the grass, who's going to take out the garbage, and the excitement wears off. What's happening is the excitement's wearing off because in our brain, the dopamine and the adrenaline is not, our brains aren't being bathed by those anymore. So the biochemical high is gone, and the real world kicks in. And the quirks, what we thought was really cute about our partner and we thought was a quirk, become more in the foreground and become very annoying. So he's late all the time. There are dirty dishes in the sink. She has morning breath. The baby's crying and you're both sleep deprived. Michelle Weiner Davis, who's a couples therapist I really respect, calls this stage, this disillusionment stage, the what was I thinking stage. And the honeymoon's over. Okay, now we're at stage 4. And again, these are very predictable stages in the life of a couple. The honeymoon's over and the couple's at a crossroads. They have to make a decision. Can they work together to sacrifice for the relationship or not? Do they know how to make the relationship good for both of them? And oftentimes couples I'll see individuals and they're asking me, should I stay or should I go? And here are the roads that people often take. They can look elsewhere for their needs when they're in after they're feeling disillusioned, and so they can turn to alcohol or drugs, food, shopping, golf, an affair, whatever it is, they turn outside of the marriage for their pleasure. Or they think, I've fallen out of love, I need to find my soulmate, and they might go to a divorce attorney and look for a divorce at that point, get separated. The other road that people take is they believe this is as good as it gets. Remember that myth that people have, this is as good as it gets, this is what everybody has to deal with. And so they just resign themselves to being unfulfilled in their relationship. And lastly, the road people could take takes the most courage, and that's really where they have an open heart, open mind, have a leap of faith, and they really invest again in their relationship. They might go to a couples retreat, they might get some books on marital therapy, or they might call me and come in for some visits. Okay. All right, so we've talked about the stages of relationships, from the romantic stage to the disillusionment and the crossroads. And now I want to talk about what happens when people are in the disillusionment stage and how they can make things worse. The reason I think it's helpful for people on the call to know this is because if we can recognize what makes things worse, then we can do damage control. We can at least stop adding fuel to the fire. So there are three common patterns of disconnection I see in my practice. There's the see no evil, hear no evil, the conflict avoidant couple. And sometimes one or both partners will be conflict avoidant, or what I call a people pleaser. That person or both the people in the couple want to keep the peace and have a belief that addressing things will only make matters worse. Their strategy is to ignore the issues. And their motto could be, let's keep the peace. I don't want to rock the boat. Whatever you want, dear, doesn't matter to me. I wanted to give you an illustration of this from a client I saw years ago. It was this lovely, very pleasant middle-aged man came to counseling, and he was very eager to please, baffled and upset that his wife was considering leaving him. And he was kind of a classic people pleaser. He really, really loved his wife, wanted to make her happy, but was so afraid of conflict. And his wife wasn't afraid of conflict. So when she would get angry, he would try to tiptoe around her and not address things. And what really escalated their marital problems is they had a teen daughter that was acting out. And the mom was taking the teen to counseling, and the dad was trying to have a low profile and not say anything, to kind of, he was walking on eggshells. And what it was so counterintuitive to him, because he thought he was helping. He thought he was being supportive of his wife. But what was counterintuitive was he was making things worse, because the quieter he got and the more passive he got, the more his wife felt hurt and neglected. So in counseling, I worked with this lovely man on how to speak up to his wife, share his concerns, talk about what he was noticing, participate more with the daughter, and have a say in the parenting. And he was really afraid to do that, but he was also really surprised because his wife liked it a lot. His wife was relieved that he was stepping in, and she really appreciated the effort he was making. She also really appreciated that he was going to counseling, because that also showed his initiative. So he became more assertive. And what was really nice about this client that I saw was that she also brought some of this new assertiveness to his work and told his boss about some of his accomplishments, spoke up a little more, and he ended up getting a promotion and a raise. So that was a really happy story. Back to people pleasers. Often people pleasers have great intentions. They want to pacify their partner, but again, the partner doesn't find this comforting, and they just see it as being ignored. They feel like the partner's running away from the marriage, abandoning them, or rejecting them. So the partner really wants to be seen and heard. Okay, I think most people can relate to this picture at some point. Definitely the laundry. If I had to hear one theme, oh my gosh, over and over, that people are overwhelmed with, is laundry. But also, oh my gosh, little kids, and kids arguing, and a baby, and maintaining a house, and life happening. So life gets in the way, and I hear this so much with, this is a human experience. Everything or everyone else comes first. There's the career, financial issues, kids, in-laws, and sometimes real life difficulties and suffering. There are illnesses and diseases. There are elderly parents. And there's some stressors for parents of special needs kids, or parents of twins or multiples. There are times when life is very overwhelming. And at these times, it's particularly important couples connect and can be there for each other. The other thing I see with couples with distraction is that what I'm putting under this category is that partners complain that they feel like they're taken for granted, that they're being neglected because of the distraction. Everything else comes first. And that's just human nature. During that romantic honeymoon period with the chemical high, our brain helps us focus or even obsess about loved ones. They've actually said, back to the brain and how it's wired when we're in love in that honeymoon period, that the brains look very similar to people suffering from OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. The same parts of the brain are activated. So we're obsessing and we're focusing and we're very accommodating. But then life takes over and we just take each other for granted. I hear couples all the time in my office say, well, of course she should do the dishes. Why thank her for something she should do? So one thing I work on with couples is how to not take each other for granted and to acknowledge each other. But again, I do hear that people with this difficulty noticing something they appreciated about their partner, or they may feel really shy or self-conscious at expressing it. And unfortunately, people aren't as shy or self-conscious about expressing criticism, and so that becomes more common than compliments. Here is the third way that couples make it worse, and this is really important. And gosh, in light of the NFL and the domestic violence, we know it can get extreme and people can reach each other, but people can also hurt each other emotionally, and pain is pain. And so, unfortunately, some couples don't know how to put on the brakes, and when there's conflict, things escalate and get out of control. They don't know how to negotiate or listen to each other, and their relationship can be characterized as competitive, where they're always battling to see who's right, to prove the other person wrong. And we know these couples when we see them. I'm sure everybody here on the line has been to a food court at the mall or a family event, and they see a couple making a scene, and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, how are they overreacting like that?" At the same time, we've all been those people. We've all been those people making a scene. And anything can trigger this. So I have couples in my office that tell me that anything can trigger the anger and hostility. But I have to say one common trigger is the car. You know, there's the joke about couples and the men not asking for directions, but I say so many issues happen when people are in a rush, when people are stressed out, when they're lost. Anyway, I see couples in my practice, and they're all often baffled as to why little things can set them off. They have no idea how to resolve conflict, compromise, or empathize with each other. And each small disagreement becomes about who's right and who's wrong, instead of focusing on ways to find win-win solutions. During these arguments, there can be lots of damage, things said that can't be taken back, threats of leaving or hurting each other. What these couples need to learn first and foremost is on how to apply the brakes and make it safe. So I've talked about how people make it worse, and I see so many couples in my practice that have such good hearts and such good intentions, and the last thing they want to do is make things worse. But these are automatic, unconscious patterns. And so my hope is that more people are educated about relationships. They read, they come to webinars like this, is that they can understand how relationships work, and they can learn skills so that they don't make things worse and they don't hurt other people. So I wanted to talk about ways to reignite your love, strategies to turn it around after the honeymoon. So the reality is the honeymoon is over, and that happens for everybody, but there are more chapters to come. We're in a modern phase of marriage where couples decide that they want to be in a marriage not out of necessity or traditional roles, but instead out of desire. So more couples, it seems like the trend now is that when couples are together, they want to have intimacy, self-growth, and fulfillment, or they don't want to be married. I think for generations, couples stayed together because they really depended on each other for their roles of breadwinner and caregiver. But now I think couples stay together because they really want that fulfillment and that intimacy. And that's great for me because that's what I really like to help people with, is to help them find a way to that they can be more together than apart. So I think it's important not to settle, and I don't mean just with your partner, but I mean with yourself. I think it's important to have really high expectations of yourself as a husband or a wife, where you really take the role seriously and want to figure out how to take care of your partner and be loving and intimate. And at the same time, I think realistic expectations. I think it's important that you don't have that you know that there are certain lines that you will not cross, and that you take care of yourself. So I really encourage couples to expect a relationship that's mutually beneficial, with respect, compassion, and fairness, so that it's a really fair, healthy marriage, not just a marriage per se. Okay. For couples to be able to sustain a healthy relationship, they have to know how to go in and out of conflict safely. They have to know how to apply the brakes, but they have to get on the highway. They can't just stay in the parking lot, not really living their life because they're afraid of conflict. I'm using car metaphors today because my son just got his driver's license yesterday. So knowing where the brakes are is really important. You can't avoid conflict. It's impossible. Just because you ignore it doesn't mean that it will go away. It's still there, but not actively being addressed. So if it's not being expressed directly the way you want, it's going to spill out some other way. It's so important that couples know how to address conflict and discuss it. And sometimes they need a experienced third party to help them create an atmosphere of safety and trust to address some really difficult, sensitive issues. They may be bearing some issues because they think it's just too overwhelming, too sensitive, too scary. But if you find a couples therapist who is very experienced, they'll know how to create a safe environment to address these touchy, tough topics. And lastly, it's so important to have an atmosphere of appreciation and acknowledgement, not only in your marriage, but in your family and in your life. That when we can give each other time, attention, and nurturance, we can really create these healthy, wonderful bonds that make us feel secure and really foster our emotional well-being. So actually, our brains are wired for negativity, and we tend to bypass the positivity. After the honeymoon period and that high, what we're left with is just really a tendency to see the dirty sock on the floor, or hear that sarcastic remark and dwell on it, instead of savoring the time your partner brought you coffee in bed. That's just the way we're wired. So I think it's so important that we practice expressing appreciation, and we learn how to give feedback so that we make it a part of our everyday life. And in my practice, I help people learn how to give positive feedback and do thoughtful, considerate things for their partner. But to do this, we have to turn off the TV, turn off the smartphone, and be awake. I just discovered this Japanese therapy. I thought it was really interesting. And it's based on self-reflection and gratitude. It's called Nikon, Naikan. And it's very different than Western thought, because I think our tendency is, when we think about our partner, we might think, well, what has he done for me lately? What has she done for me lately? And it's easy to hold resentment. So in this Nikon therapy, to counter that, they have a self-reflection based on 3 questions that each person is supposed to ask themselves, and to, to journal, to record it, make it a regular practice. The first question is, what have I received from my partner? So for instance, and to think of everything within 24 hours, not to neglect a thing. So your partner got out of bed and showered quietly so that he didn't wake you up. Your partner took out the garbage. Your partner called to check on you. So what have I received? To really acknowledge that and to be aware of that. The second question is, what have I given to him or her? It's really easy to dwell on ways that when we're upset, it's really easy to think, oh, I do all the giving and so-and-so doesn't give anything. But this is important to take an honest account. What have I given to my partner? And I think when people are being really honest, sometimes they can see that they're not giving as much as they think they're giving. And then the last question is, what troubles and difficulties have I caused? So this is counterintuitive because we are naturally wired to think about how other people inconvenience us and how other people hurt us. But this is kind of doing a 180. We're really asked to think about what troubles and difficulties have I caused, not necessarily intentionally, but how might you not be the easiest or the most fun person to be with? And when you do this exercise, I think it helps to balance the playing field so that you can have more of an appreciation for your partner. And what I encourage people to do is to express that appreciation. And the other thing I think it teaches people is, you might be high maintenance yourself, and you probably are, because we all are. So we're coming to the end of my part of the webinar. I'm going to look at the chat and see and address people's questions. But before I do that, I just wanted to let you know that I enjoy doing these webinars, and I am happy to hear your feedback about what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to learn more about. We're in the process of creating a series of webinars on parenting and family issues, stress management, and relationships. So we would love to hear your feedback about what you would like to hear more of. And in addition, if any of you want to talk to me privately, I'm happy to offer a consultation. And that's free on the telephone, or you're welcome to set up an appointment, and I would be happy to talk to any of you. So I'm going to look at the chat now. Feel free to write comments or ask questions. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone again for coming to this webinar. It's a fascinating topic. I never get tired of this topic, and I love sharing what I know. And I've learned so much over the years from what I've learned from each and every one of you and all the couples that I meet. So thank you so much for coming to this webinar, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.